Dear colleagues, thank you very much and a warm welcome. I'm really delighted to have our partner foundations with us. This is exactly the idea of the Martin Center, a not only trans-European, but as we have learned in our transatlantic dialogue the last 2 days, transatlantic relations. The topic is an ambitious one, so we try to find also in particular the regional perspective, which is very interesting for our guests, and our guests are not only here in Valencia at the EPP Congress, but also online in our live stream, so feel welcome as well abroad. I think it's fair to say that the relation between the United States and Europe is undergoing a kind of critical phase, and I think most probably the most critical one since the Second World War. Everybody's talking about solutions, finding a kind of peace. I'm reluctant, frankly speaking, about peace and stability. We will see what promises, what hopes might be rectified, but I think we all agree that it's one of the most complex and consequential decisions we have to make over the next few days, weeks, and months. Well, I just looked into how many days the Russian invasion started. It's 1,161 days. It's almost unbelievable, and I don't want to think of the victims and the sufferings, but nonetheless, well, there are ongoing calls for a kind of settlement and what kind of compromises we are able to find. But you know, the closer you look to something, the more complex things sometimes get. Is it just about freezing front lines? Is it about recognizing territory, occupied territory? What kind of security guarantees can we, NATO, EU, whoever, can give to Ukraine afterwards? So there's a lot of things in legal, military, strategic and moral dimensions we have to discuss. I think everybody agrees that United States and Europe are absolutely vital, and that's more than ever a reason to come to common ground despite some substantial differences. I think we should not be in doubt that the United States will continue their support. What kind of support, in which way, and what the role of Europe might be is then very much at stake. We have roughly 40 minutes to discuss issues, and I'm very delighted if you really share your regional perspective, because, well, good from the United States, of course, but for you from the Nordic and the Baltic countries, I think their view might be a bit different sometimes from Central Europe or Southwest European countries, but the more interesting it is to have you here. Let me just say a few words on I'm very delighted, Karin, to have you with us. A strong background in defense and security as the former defense minister, but you're also the Secretary General of our sister party, the Moderates. So this is another issue that we have two layers, the official one and the party level. The same goes for you, Laurinas. You're president of the Homeland Union. This is our Lithuanian sister party, and also former Minister of Defense. And good, I think you hardly have to introduce yourself because you had been for many years the face indeed in Europe at NATO.
As Will Rogers said about the Democratic Party, I'm not a member of any political party, organized political party. I'm a Republican.
But even more interesting than that. So, Karin, let me start with you indeed from a Nordic perspective, absolutely crucial and getting more and more important. Let's assume there is a kind of agreement with Russia and Ukraine with under the umbrella of whatever. What do you think and how do you think will this have implications for the transatlantic relations? Because this is at the core of our today's discussions. Will it be strengthened? Will there be new frictions? What is your perspective, given your stand of the country in this constellation?
Well, thank you, and thank you so much for including me in this extremely important discussion. Many years ago, when I started with foreign policy and security policy, we had more theoretical discussions about things. Now it's not theoretical; it's extremely realistic. It's IRL. It's happening now. People are suffering. People are dying, and we know that there is a very easy ending of this war. That would be that Mr. Putin just stopped, but he's not going to stop. So just to say that we are in I would say this is existential, not just for Ukraine. It's existential for Europe, and I would say for the whole world even, since we see this challenging of the rules-based world order. So that's the big problem. Then we can go into details, but just to have said that, to have that stated, and just to, when we go into the discussion, it's really difficult waters, I can say, as a former, not naval officer, but amphibious officer. But Sweden's position in this remains clear. We will continue to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. But will that be enough? I mean, Sweden, we will do what we can as long as it takes, but we have to find a solution together, of course. So to be very clear, I mean, for us, not just in Sweden, but the Nordic countries, the Nordic Baltic countries, for nations as us, the rules-based order is yes, it's the most important thing that we have. We are not very small countries, and together we are, I mean, quite a strong bunch of nations. And if you put our defense together, the Nordic part, and then the rest of the EU, yeah, okay, but it's not enough, of course. But for us, as being a middle-sized nation, we need this order. Yes, if you have, you have your territory. The principle of sovereignty, it's not negotiable. So if we start there, then of course every form of peace agreement or like an end of war must be most of the time, some kind of negotiation, maybe a compromise, but I mean, it's in our, I think in the head, the compromise, it depends so much how it looks. What will it look like? Who's compromising with whom here? Is it the US and or is it Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin compromising together? And of course, our stand is not unusual. We say, I mean, Ukraine must not just have a place at the table. They have to be the most important part in this negotiation or in this peace. So
we go for these more fundamental questions, which go beyond even the transatlantic relation, because this is an order issue, as you correctly pointed out. But back to the transatlantic relations, I had been to Vilnius a couple of weeks ago with another interesting event, and I have seen how important the US presence is seen in your country. That's the backbone, despite European troops being deployed there. But Marinjas, give us an insight how you perceive, from the Baltic perspective, the role of the United States and what you expect.
It's a vital role, of course. You know, in Lithuanian identity, we always was saying and keep saying, more American Europe, more safer is Lithuania. So it's a fundamental thing from Ronald Reagan. We are like waiting for Reaganist Republicans, you know, and looking for them. You know, we have one here, you know, but we'd like to have it more. So it's a vital. But of course, if you look at NATO defense planning, you see already in the Biden period, what U.S. is like moving to the backstop, you know, more, you know, be more responsible. As America is saying, be more responsible. It's clear message to Europe. You need to be on the ground forces more responsible, but we will be your backstop with enablers, with others, what you are lacking, you know. So it's like, and we understand that pivot to Asia and that kind of things, but President Trump is doing it in a very radical way, and that's why we are waiting for now the posture review, and we'll see how it will affect us. We are, you know, Eastern flank is defense spending is crucial moment here. We are now, our ambitions is to have 5-6% of GDP next year. Latvia, Estonia is doing the same. Poland is already in the 5-6% zone. So we are hoping and willing to believe, you know, what our attempts, our resources will keep Americans in eastern flank. That's why we are really sensitive on understanding what can be a kind of scenario. You know, I will tell you one short, interesting story. I was the chair of the Defense Committee, and we have Nordic-Baltic format. And we met the chairs 2 years ago in Germany to talk about a little bit European security and defense architecture. And one of my colleagues from the Nordic countries was asking German generals, tell me which army in Europe is the strongest one? And German general said, Americans. Yeah, we know what Americans is strongest, but in Europe, Americans. So Americans in Europe is the strongest army. Maybe now it's maybe Ukraine, but anyway, we have such kind of vital role here of America. So shortly, this is the answer.
Well, Kurt, Karen already alluded to the who is at the table. And
Yeah.
you know, this is one of the nightmares for Europeans, not only Ukrainians, that there might be a kind of negotiations across their heads. How do you think can we be better involved? What kind of ideas is currently discussed?
So Karin and I agree on just about everything, and it's just that I would say things differently, because I hear this all the time in Europe that, oh, Europe's not at the table, and I don't see it. I see, President Trump meeting with Macron, with Starmer, with Rutte, people going to the NATO foreign ministers meetings, bilateral relations, Maloney coming to Washington, Trump calling people up on the phone. There's an enormous amount of consultation. And this is not different. I mean, if you think back to, in the first term of the Trump administration, I was the special representative for Ukraine. I think back before that, during the Obama administration, Victoria Nuland was doing that job. Think to the Biden administration, it's always this movable feast of meetings. There's always these consultations going on. So I don't think that there's such a lack of consultation as people make it out to be. And the reality is that there isn't a table. People say, oh, we want to be at the table. Well, that's great, but where's the table? There isn't one. There is no, Congress of Vienna with everybody, camped down for 3 months to just talk about one issue. It's these side meetings like that. Now, what I do see, and I'm actually encouraged by this, I see Trump emphasizing burden sharing and rebalancing the burdens within Europe, but I see Europe saying, yeah, you're right. We have to do this. We need to take on more ourselves. I'm encouraged by that. I'm not encouraged when it is packaged in Europe as, well, we can't trust the Americans anymore, so we have to fight back. That's not the no, it should be that we're rebalancing our common efforts here, which is going to make it more sustainable for the future. So I think that is very good. And just one more point on Ukraine. I see Europe coming forward with parts of the solution. When we talk about deterring future Russian attacks, I see Starmer and Macron taking the lead on European security assurances and a European reassurance force that would be there. That's going to be a very important component of going from a ceasefire, which is where Trump is focused, to a long-term stabilization of the conflict, so that Ukraine can be safe, Europe can be safe, and Ukraine can integrate into Europe.
You put one top word right in the center, that's the trust issue, and we have extensively discussed this over the last days. I think our foundations are very much in favor of strengthening this transatlantic relations, but yeah, there's a long way still to go, and I do not discuss which side is right or wrong. I think that's the basis, and all these assumptions on not being at the table is, I think, rooted or are rooted in this fundamental, trust to rebuild. But Karin, you
And just
and both.
my point, and I don't think you said it either. My point was that Ukraine must be a part of the deal,
Yeah.
not that every European country must be at the table. So, that Ukraine,
Well,
it's a must.
Same point applies.
Exactly.
Ukraine is
Exactly.
consulted all the time.
Yeah. So, so I think we have the same view.
Well, Yes, you pointed out to the wider dimensions. Yes, we have this theater in the east of Europe, but there's always second thoughts. What will be the lessons? And it's not only lessons we have to learn or are learning. There are others, adversaries on the other side of the world, looking very carefully how Europe and the United States together, hopefully, are solving these kind of issues. I'm thinking of China and other adversaries out there. What do you think are the lessons, if we can talk already about that at the current stage? What is your impression? What would you advise, looking a bit beyond the current conflict?
A little bit view from NATO defense planning. We have NATO catalog, we have new generation NATO plans which are based, land forces are more European on eastern flank, but Americans are coming with enablers if it's needed. So if we lack anti-ballistic long-range missiles, air defense systems, Americans are coming. If you want to strike deeper into the enemy's centers and then strategic objects, Americans are coming. Intelligence, American vital role. So this is a model which works if everything is okay. So, and now I will be frank with you, we have discussion already in Lithuania. But if there is a tectonical geopolitical shift, you need to have plan B. When maybe this is not coming. Maybe enablers is not coming. I hope it will come. I hope plan A is working, but you already need to talk about plan B. And now you should rethink all your procurement, all your defense strategy, and many, many, many things. So this is like a little bit, I would say now is challenging our strategic thinking.
That, Kurt, affects the roles, the self-perception of both of us. As you, Lorenz, pointed out, there is a lot of things underway. I think the promises, and we got the messages finally. But how do you think will this affect the current architecture? You had been ambassador to NATO. We have a lot of discussion in Brussels. Is this a European NATO in 10 to 15 years? What might be the framework?
Yeah, well, first off, I think what Laurinus is talking about, again, phrasing it differently, we simply don't have enough defense capability. And the US has been doing a lot, and as a proportion of total NATO country defense spending, we had gotten up to the 75% range of total NATO country defense spending. That's too much for the US compared to everyone else. It is beginning to rebalance. Europeans are taking more on. It needs to keep going in that direction. And that should allow Europe to play more of a leading role on the security issues within Europe, while the US has to build its capabilities as well, but to deal with global challenges, particularly coming from China. And what I hope is that even though we're going through a period of some friction in US-European discussions right now, we don't, lost in that is not the fact that we have a shared interest dealing not only with Russia, but dealing with China. So that the US may take on a bigger role because out of necessity we have to deal with China. Europe needs to take on a bigger role when it comes to Russia, but I hope we are still able to talk and align our policies to deal with China together as well.
Karen, the move of your country to NATO was, I think, the most important in post-war history, but now you are also leading to some extent, not only in capabilities, but also in strategic discussions. We did not touch upon the Arctic, for example, or other issues. So how do you see the rebalancing the efforts and how to maintain? Because one of my biggest concern is if there's a kind of settlement, the pressure is off, and then we, some at least, might, good old times might be back.
Well, I hope that at least we have learned our lesson to really, I mean, to not go down too low when it comes to defense capability as a whole. And as you know, we have doubled our military spending the last 4 years, and we are now leveling up even more. We had like a ladder up, and that is even more steep with 300 billion Swedish crowns in 10 years that we will, for once loan. That's not common, but we have seen this is so important. So we can use the fact that we have stable state finances, so we can do this. But I think, I mean, and I do agree, the rebalancing is totally necessary. We have to do that, and it's a maybe. Mr. Trump has a very blunt way of saying it, but it's not new. We know that, and I don't know if this was what it takes this kind of wording, but still, this is something, a homework that we have to do, and we have to continue to do it. But it would be nice if we can find a more common way forward, so it's not like seen as there is a conflict. Okay, we have issues, and we look into the issues and we solve the issues and we promise each other to this and that, and then we continue forward together. So that is what I would like to see. But I think it's really interesting now to see, several European nations stepping up, and maybe this could be EU moment also for security, both when it comes to security and when it comes to, well, economy and competitiveness. And so let's see. But I think for many of us, the combination between security policy issues and then the trade, if it's not a war, but the trade issues and the tariffs, I think that combination, it was maybe, or no, not just maybe, it makes it more difficult because it's so many things to take in and to react to all the time, like hour by hour. So we really have to, I think, take a deep breath as well and think, okay, what is important? What do we have to prioritize? Both when it comes to, well, maybe some changes in plans and in preparations, and maybe in the dialogue as well. Not just run away and be very, very, well, yeah, concerned and worried and see. We have to be optimistic but also pragmatic at the same time.
Well, yesterday we had the opportunity to meet Andris Kubilius, the new Defense Commissioner, also for space, which is often forgotten. Yes, it's about time, it's about prioritization, and you Linus, alluded to the NATO planning, the existing one. I think we will see some reformations. Would you dare an outlook how this framework will look like maybe in 5 years?
You know, we have very good moves 2 years ago when we started to develop this new generation plans. For example, Secure, now four-star US general, he has already more free hands doing some flexible decisions without agreeing of all NATO countries. We need more flexibility, for example, readiness, logistical lines, trainings, exercises as a deterrence factor. So it's a good way forward. Now what is also new and good, but before that we had deterrence by punishment. The concept means that if something happens, NATO comes together and deoccupy some part of NATO. Now we have deterrence by denial, to have so much forces in eastern flank or where is needed with reinforcement which should deter when it's needed. No. So it's a good thinking, good shift, I would say. And now our defense plans of NATO is based not only on the assumption what we have today and we gather and trying to do something, but we need to do, what we need to have, what kind of capability targets we need. So it's a good way of thinking. The problem is, of course, political will. Europe has resources, but we already more than 3 years in the war. We have new production lines, but not new factories of defense industry. And this is the big challenge, how to accelerate and speed up. But it's not only about the defense industry. Russia is thinking what their quantity in some stages can become its quality, and quantity transforms into quality. Because NATO and Western Europe, they compete with Russia with the idea that we are more technological progressive. We are technological superpower. We can strike some crushing strikes into Russian territory and they will push back. Maybe they will push back, but we are quantity and they can come back. That's why when you need to create a real defense and deterrence architecture, you need to talk not only about defense industry, not only about weapons, but also about manpower, about conscripts, about armies, which are shortened in some countries of EU, of NATO, European NATO countries 2-3 times since the Cold War, end of Cold War. So you see how it's challenging the situation. That's why we need to rethink our strategy, but it's not so easy to do it because it's identity, that kind of things. I remember I talked 5-6 years ago with one member of German Bundestag Defense Committee member from Social Democratic Party. He was saying, look, our Bundeswehr people and our soldiers was like a social worker with uniforms. So it was 5-6 years ago. Now it's changing. It's really Zeitenwende changing with Pistorius leadership, with Merz. I think we will have a new move forward. But it's still, how much we should overcome.
Well, I think it's not only an issue here on our European soil. We alluded a bit to the complexity on geopolitical issues and linking the European theatre to what is happening in the Western Pacific, for example, because much is driven, of course, this famous pivot to Asia. For years, it's nothing new, basically. So, Kurt, how do you think these two theatres will be connected? What is our role? And you mentioned the redefining of the role of the German forces. They had been employed for specific employments in Afghanistan, for example, or in Sahel, but not back to a large-scale landscape. This is a fundamental reshift, but this is linked, of course, to what the overarching strategic dimensions are.
Yeah, it's an interesting question when you put it as these two theaters being linked. To me, it doesn't quite feel that way, at least not now. China sees itself as a global power and is both interested in territory in its region, but influence power, economics, technology, Belt and Road, everything globally. And Russia, it kind of looks at, to coin a word here, transactionally. It says if Russia has cheap energy they want to sell, we'll buy it. If Russia wants to buy our stuff, they can buy it. But they're not strategically aligned with Russia's goals of tearing up Europe. In fact, China wants to do business in Europe. China would love to be part of Ukraine's reconstruction. They sell things to Ukraine right now. So it is not so clear-cut that these things are linked in that way. Another thing, I want to come back to some of the earlier points that came up in conversation, because they are kind of interesting. I think we shouldn't be so glib about saying that Russia has quantity. Europe has more quantity than Russia. 9 times the GDP, at least 3 times the population. I mean, what Europe lacks is organization and will. But it could outdo Russia in every category, especially with know-how and technology, equipment that actually works. I mean, Europe can do that. So I wouldn't concede to Russia the idea that they have quantity. The other thing that's really interesting that's going on now, you were asking about, what will NATO be like in the future? We are seeing a transformation in battlefield developments and technology and the cost of defense articles because of the war in the war in Ukraine. People are using drones, so there's less human component, more remote component. These drones are cheap, and what the Ukrainians talk about is a cost-to-kill ratio that has been driven way, way down because of the Ukrainians' use of this. This is something that NATO needs to learn from. We have to integrate this technology and this know-how into what NATO is thinking about as it looks to defense in the future. Otherwise, we're going to outprice ourselves. What we produce and do will be too expensive to be effective.
Well, we focus very much on the military issue, but some of you already alluded that it is very linked to trade issues, to other issues of the global order, and talking about the US-European relations, and there's much more at stake. Maybe you could widen our discussion a bit into how things are affected, for example, by reconstruction of the Ukraine. There was not a loud outcry on the mining issue, but I think it misses the point that there's a huge opportunity for both of us also to reshape our own economies, because this is intrinsically linked to each other. Some thoughts on that side beyond pure military considerations?
Well, it all depends. But I think, when we join up, when we team up, Europe and the US, we are unbeatable, and that goes on almost every field. And I think we have to be unbeatable versus China, that we won't reach this kind of. There is, of course, a kind of race, but we would like to postpone or try to at least, make it less dangerous, maybe a race against China. And if we team up and have maybe not exactly the same goal, but team up, then everything would be not just more easy, but it would be good both for the American citizens and taxpayers and for the whole of Europe, not just the EU, and also I would say for the rest of the world, with something stable not disruptive all the time. Because if you see the political development in, well, yes, both in Europe and the US, we see that, and also in Latin America, disruptive leaders seems to be quite popular at the time because, yeah, people are disappointed. They haven't seen their standard of life. They hasn't gone up. The salaries are not raising anymore. So, and what's left then? So people are disappointed, want something to believe in or on, and the disruptive way of doing things stir things up, and sometimes you need to shake, not just stir, also shake. But what's the end game? That's what I'm would like to have more discussions about.
Well, you alluded also how to convince people. You have been both or still active politicians. So imagine how to sell this story we talking about on a very abstract level, but imagine you are on the marketplace, you have to tell your voters what is in it for you. What's the key message?
I take the word again, but I think in Sweden we have extremely high support both for military spending, and we have like a political consensus in parliament. So there is a very solid support for defense spending and for the EU and support to Ukraine. So for us, we have already sold it, but we have to sell it to more, not just in Sweden.
If I'm answering your question, if I will take this debate, Russian quantity and quality, I agree absolutely. If you look at the numbers, Russia is like a Netherlands GDP, but the problem of the West, of the democracies, we have elections, we have political cycles, we have protests, we have, everything. It's not, it's a good thing. But if you want to compete with Russia, which is autocracy, which from generation to generation was autocratical regime and tradition. When your citizenship, you understand as a obligation of a leader's, what he said is right, and we're gonna do it, and that's why when. The business people from Lithuania is also asking, so you gather everything together in you and you can strike these Russians who are so small and weak, looking just simply statistically. But it's autocracy which can mobilize, they don't care about human, resources and many other things. That's why sometimes we need more political will and a change in our approach. And here in our countries, and I know in Sweden and in Finland and also in the Baltics, we understand if we want to deter and defend ourselves, we need not only mechanization, equipment, regular army, land forces, but we need also a whole of society approach. You need at least to show what your nation have a will to defend your country, because the Russians are counting if their enemy in their eyes will defend the country or not. The biggest mistake in Ukraine, we really had a plan of 2-3 weeks bringing uniforms in the tanks for a parade for May 9 of 2022, because they thought that Ukrainians will not resist, and that Ukrainians resisted. And it was the biggest mistake by Russians, by Putin, by their intelligence. So will to defend is also important driving force for deterrence and defense.
But Kurt, convincing the American public isn't either.
Right. No, but I think that the American public understands risks and threats and challenges out there in the world. They want to have the strongest military in the world. They see China and Russia both as a threat. The public does. I think Trump has tried to engage Putin as a way to end the war in Ukraine rather than confront Putin, at least so far. Maybe that will change, but so far. But I think the public understands that these are real threats out there.
So what can we Europeans do, if we can do something?
It's a simple formula. I was asked this question a year before Trump was reelected. And it's don't make assumptions about what's going to happen. We simply don't know. Do your own homework as to what the issues are, what Europe can do about it, what Europe thinks the right policies are, and what resources Europe can bring to bear. And then be proactive, propose things. Too often, the European default setting is to wait, worry, and complain. And that has to be overcome by being open, prepared, and proactive.
Well, representing a European foundations, we are looking to the European level as well, and I think we agree that the nation states remain the pillar on European defense, but there is something in for the European Union. This is something we have to convince to restructure. I mentioned Kubilius' work, that is issues of market questions, procurement, how open are the new rules to UK and the United States. I think this is a tricky thing also in Europe. Some thoughts on that, and what would be the message we have to push back in Brussels, for example?
If I may, so we have many challenges here. I am in favor of be open to Americans' procurement and participation in whole European projects. In Europe, we have challenges. But I give you an example? We have artillery systems. One company, another company, and we have 155 millimeters ammunition. I thought before I was a minister, but you can put one missile into one system and to another, and they will shoot. Not necessary.
Yeah.
Certification, typologification, and that kind of things needs transform that kind of thing, because after the Cold War we created so fragmented market because companies wanted to have a monopoly, and we have challenges now. In Russia, you can put 152, what we are using in every, in a cannon. So this is a challenge. For example, let's solve it. I mean, let's start solving such kind of things. So, and it's just start of problems, So absolutely, what on America, I also will be frank. I'm in favor of more procurement from America, but the situation when switch off of HIMARS, F-35, or somewhere like this, it does not create trust here. Buying equipment which will be in some scenarios could be when they're saying we will strike deeper, maybe you'll not be allowed to strike deeper. So this is a problem, and this is a challenge.
Yes, and to be fixed by investment in developing Europe's autonomous capabilities. I fully agree. If I were to give advice to Brussels, back to your question, I would be urging them to think more about the environment created in Europe for building tech industry and tech ecosystem. Right now, it's only the United States and China that are really leading in tech development. And if I were Europe, I would want to have my own European tech ecosystem that is developing innovations, AI, new technologies, and bringing that into a marketplace. So it's not only the US and China that are doing that.
That's a point we at the Martin Center, for example, pointed very much on, because this was an underestimated and underinvested issue. There are a lot of obstacles, by the way, to overcome this and acknowledge the new reality of hybrid warfare. There is no longer any differentiation between civil and military issues. Some countries, my own home country included, is a tricky thing to overcome. But Karen, you had been very also responsible for the Swedish defense industry, which is leading in some parts. Where do you see this industry standing now?
Well, very stable foundation, very stable ground. But I think at this point we have to be more agile. I mean, as both the EU and the EU countries to skip some of all the points in our our checklists, because we have so much bureaucracy, so much red tape, so, as you said, certification and regulations, and if you just look into one, very good, yeah, very, yeah, you can argue for that, but that makes us slow, and we are too slow, both when it comes to producing defense material and procurement, but also when it comes to we do have so much resources, but I think we are too slow. We have to loosen the grip a little bit and dare also to have some courage to do things.
Well, we are not touching this wide range of deregulation. This is the topic of other of our discussions later this day. A last issue, probably from next week on, we see a new government in Germany. With a lot of expectations on new leadership. I'm always a bit reluctant on using this, but Germany has and will play a central role. So for the last 4 minutes, I would like to discuss a bit what are the expectations, how, in which kind of corporations, and do not exclude UK relations, which are absolutely crucial, and of course the United States. So what do you expect from the new government in Germany?
Well, a center-right government willing to take responsibility, not being too cautious, because I think we have also been suffering from not a leaderless Europe, but it's difficult when there's no leader in Germany. It has been like a vacuum, or like a just you pressed pause and waited, and that's not good for us. So we need someone to interact with and to be in the front. It's extremely important, also bilaterally. The Swedish-German relations are very important.
Yeah. But you also followed quite closely, I think.
Absolutely, you know, we have
last years.
special relations because of German brigade and
Yeah.
all German role in our defense planning, and absolutely, I'm very happy. But you know, fantastic colleague Boris Pistorius from Social Democrat, but you know, it's a miracle Social Democrat for us, I would say. Together with Chancellor Merz, we'll push things forward, you know, and I really expect leadership from Germany. And all through decisions on defense spending shows that. So I think it's time to step in and step up for Germany, absolutely.
Good. When will we see a first meeting between Merz and Trump?
Well, I wish we would have already seen it. I wish that he would have gone to Mar-a-Lago in January before Trump was president, start like Meloni did and like others did to try to start building that relationship. But sooner rather than later, I think President Trump recognizes that the biggest economy in Europe is Germany. The biggest potential contributor, and often actual contributor to things that we do, is Germany. He also, when he gets frustrated about things like tariffs and trade imbalances, he often targets Germany. So I hope that meeting comes up sooner rather than later. And if I could think about, you know, your question, what should Germany do? Well, first off, maintain and increase that higher level of defense spending that they've already committed to, and take that a bit further, and do so with purpose, not just to spend the money, but to have a concept of what role Germany can play as more of a leadership role on security in Europe. That's one very, very big thing. Another will be to play more of a leading role in the future of what happens after a ceasefire in Ukraine. If Starmer and Macron are doing that, I'd like to see Merz joined up with that, so that it becomes a real all of Europe effort.
Great. Well, we touched a lot of things. We will continue these discussions not only today and tomorrow, but in the work of our foundations. We are more than happy that we have this transatlantic DNA in our soul. Much has to be done. I would like to thank you, Karin, Nils, and Kurt, for this wonderful exchange. Also, ladies and gentlemen, for your interest.